Okay, I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. It's 7:30 PM on February 15th. First order of business is public comment. I haven't received any by email. Jen, have you seen any?
No.
And there's no one in the audience. So before we get to the third item on our agenda, which is discuss and take action on the Town Hall Employees Union Contract, I'd like to make a motion to move that until after item 5, just so that we have Ed Gentile here and Pam Geary, just so they can talk to the two items, what was previously number 4 and 5, and then we can let them go home. So, do I have a second? All in favor? Great.
Get on where they are.
Perfect. Okay. The next item is to discuss and take action on a special appropriation for Gorham's Pond Dam repair design for $160,000. Ed, we've moved around the agenda a little bit just so we can listen to you and then Pam and get you all out of here. So if you'd like to give us a little bit of a overview and background on this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And you know, for the board's information, I sent Ed an email, earlier this afternoon, with some of the questions I've gotten from others here, and some of the ones I had as well. So,
I'll give a quick intro and then hit some of the questions that you had, Chairman, and then open it to any questions after that maybe I have not answered for you folks. So the special appropriation request is for a design for the repair of the Gorham's Pond Dam, recently damaged on September 2nd by Storm Ida. We all know the amount of water coming down through Stony Brook. I had seen that, and if you didn't get down to Rings End Road to see the water coming over that dam, we were 3 or 4 feet above the top of the dam with flows at low tide. Totally damaging and moving the larger boulders off the end of the dam. This dam is, yeah, please do. Darren's going to pass around some of the photos. Jim, you had asked for some photos if we had them. We did. We put them together. We gave you a before and then some of the after shots. We circled some of the areas so you could see them easily. Please take a look at those. But what had happened with the large flows, they took the larger boulders at the end of the dam and rolled them forward. They rolled them forward because they scoured about a 3 or 4 foot hole out in front of the dam. These boulders tipped over and fell. Now what happens now is you're exposing the softer interior of the dam. It's a soft core, which means it's filled with fines and clay and it's impermeable soil, but it's not supposed to be exposed to the tides. So what's happening now in a couple of the spaces, the tide's coming in, it's coming out. So it's eroding, it's starting to erode that inner portion. We currently have a temporary declaration from the DEP for an emergency repair. We got that quite quickly with our consultant. We have contractors on board ready to do the temporary repair next week. The weather is going to be in our favor, the tides are going to be in our favor. The repair is the placement of stones and filter fabric in these damaged areas, if you will. It's almost like a Band-Aid. So the tides can't pull the fines out of the dam. That should hold us for a while until we can get the design completed. We have a 3 to 4 month window to do that from the consultant. Bid the project and then go out and get the construction documents and everything ready to go with the contractor. That's the preliminary schedule, if you will. I'm told right now that the temporary repair will hold it for a while. Depending on the design and bidding environment and funding, of course. If we don't get the repair done before this winter, it'll end up being in the springtime of next year. That's the tentative schedule that I have in my head right now. That's what we're working towards. The consultant we are using has done work on dams previously. They worked on the dam just north of the Goodwise River Road Bridge. The demolition and repair up there, I worked on that specifically with this consultant. They came readily available down to us. They worked with us to get the temporary. They gave us a proposal of almost $190,000 to do the design. Working with Darren and the consultant, they pared down some of the information and some of the investigative work that was being done. Some of the stuff we did in-house already, so we had the information. some of the stuff we were doing with an outside consultant already as far as survey work. We were able to supplement some of their work there, so we got the price down to, what we're looking for now is around $160,000. So it was a $30,000 savings. That's not going to be detrimental to the project at all. We're just supplementing some of the other work that we did to give the consultant information on the dam. At the same time as doing the dam, we also did the bridges, and that's why we had another consultant already doing work down there that we were able to supplement it with. We did the Rings End Road Bridge, Old Kings Highway, and Camp Avenue were the three that we had them do work on. So together, we were able to get the price down. I think, Jim, that was one of your questions. What was done to get the price down to 60? That was one of the reasons we could do that. The consultant that we have working for us is well-versed in the DEP process for permitting. Like I said, they did the dam just north of Goodwise River without issue. Did the closeout documents with me without a problem. We did not go out and bid this. We actually selected a consultant that we had done work previously and has done work on dams with us, and that we felt comfortable, knew enough about the Goodwise River, Gorham's Pond, and the Rings End Road Bridge to work seamlessly with us. Now currently, the Board of Selectmen has approved this. We're here before you for a special appropriation. I have, if approved, moving forward with the RTM, we're looking to get approval by the 28th so that we can start this design immediately. I'll answer any questions you may have, or I can touch on some of the ones that you put forward, Chairman. We did have pictures. I think that was one of your first questions. We're passing them around to you.
Yep.
They may give you a flavor, but the best way to look at this dam is to go down there and take a look at what was older, what is new. You can see some of the areas where the concrete's cantilevered over, and there's a big opening underneath where the water has come and basically just took all the fines and pulled them out to the sound. This is a good question. Darren and I have talked about this. Is the town required to maintain and repair the dam or just the bridge? In looking at the documents that I have and the lease agreement and the different opinions from multiple lawyers over the last, I'd say the last 22 years, 23 years, as far back as what I have, it shows us as leasing the bridge and maintaining it. And we've done work on the bridge and done repairs on it already. It also says that we need to keep the tide gates functioning and anything associated with the tide gates that make them work, which is the dam. And we've done work on the dam before and the tide gates. So there's past practice that we have put money and effort into maintaining both the bridge and the dam. Now, I understand that lease is coming to an end soon. It's a 100-year lease. That portion of your question, Chairman, is probably better answered by Attorney Fox than for me. But as of right now, I'm moving forward with this knowing that that dam is a critical component to that bridge, in my opinion. Not knowing what those bridge abutments are sitting on right now. I need to get that dam back functioning. I need to make sure that that it doesn't impact the bridge.
So, Ed, just for the board's perspective, my second question was sort of three parts. One was who actually owns Gorham's Pond there, and who actually owns the bridge and or the dam, like that actual property and those structures right there. And it sounds like if we're leasing it, somebody else owns it. And then the other question was, I guess as part of that lease, whatever, are we actually required to, is it effectively a triple net lease where we're required to maintain it?
I think that the part that I read today from two different attorneys was that we have a responsibility to maintain the bridge and the dam. And that's from an engineer reading it. We have done it in the past, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's why Darren went out and got everything ready to go with this. We were under the full assumption that we need to make full repair on that dam right now, and we need to do it as quickly as possible.
Okay. And do you know who actually owns that property there? The actual road and or dam?
I don't. And that's, we have had Wayne Fox and his crew looking into that for basically the last 4 months to give us ownership of that dam and where our limits are on it and where they're not. Specifically with regards to people that going out there and putting themselves in harm's way. And we were asked to make a determination of where we can tell people they can't go and where we tell they can. That comes to ownership. In a right-of-way, you can't tell someone you can't go there. All you can tell them it's dangerous. So if the ownership was private property, there's a good chance we could make a declaration out there or a sign that says, you can't come out here, it's dangerous, please, no trespassing, that type of thing. We've been working on that for about 4 or 5 months with Wayne to come up with a solution to the quote-unquote ownership and what portions are town and which portions aren't of that dam that's out there right now.
But is the ownership and/or the lease, is that part of the bridge? Is that the actual bridge or the dam or the property, or?
I
is it
read
just
the
a
lease, it has both of it in there, but the lease was specific to the bridge and mentioned the tide gates and its dam that goes with it. Because the tide gates don't work if you don't have the dam. So they said the town's responsible for maintaining the tide gates and any appurtenances to that, which is any other portion to keep the water from going in and out when the tide gates are open or closed.
So that's the purpose of the dam, is to protect the bridge abutments from tides?
There's not a lot of places I could say where dams are built to do that. I think this one does, because it's there. Reason for dams in previous centuries, if you will, is to run mills from it, right? Get the water up higher, you run the milling, you run the water wheel, the whole thing. That's why the dam was in place. You can direct that kind of thing. This one actually creates a pond, Gorham's Pond. Chairman, to your question, who owns Gorham's Pond? Well, it's the waters of the United States. Up until you get to, it gets really, really tight. And then if you look on our tax map, you'll see that some folks own to the center of the quote-unquote river that's coming down. So there is a section in there that's owned by the United States, the waters of the United States, because it's tidal.
When is the lease up?
Here's a good question. I have 2 dates from 1920, and I think it's a 100-year lease, and 1925, and it's still a 100-year lease. So I don't know where that lease actually ends.
So there's
And
no
it's-
actual payment being sent on a regular basis to anyone?
It's 1 cent a year.
Oh.
Best deal, I
Is
think.
it actually being sent somewhere?
No.
Jen, have we budgeted for
I would have
that?
to ask the finance director if she's sending a check for 1 penny anywhere, and I don't think
But
she
we
is.
obviously don't need to renew the lease then? Is that the?
Difference of opinions on that, and more for the people that own property around Gorham's Pond and more of the legal counsel issues, but probably not something that I can opine on, or should.
I can certainly see us, needing to shore up the bridge so that people can travel over it safely. But the damming, if it's simply to create, a nice pond to look at, maybe that's more the purview of homeowners that wish to have a pond to look at.
Has or will FEMA be approached to compensate the town for some of this?
That was another one of the chairman's good questions.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't read his questions.
Let me, no, that's okay, I like that.
I should have, I do apologize, I should have forwarded them. I copied Dan, I should have.
They want to know if this is going to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. I guess that's everybody's question, right? To my understanding, as best in dealing with FEMA, and I have for the last 25, 30 years, though they do change their opinion on a lot of things, damage to infrastructure is one of the things that they do reimburse for. They'll reimburse you for the design on occasion. This one, I believe, would fall in the category. But our first meeting and briefing is tomorrow for Ida. With finally the governor making the declaration as he did for the 2 counties. The briefings actually are starting and kicking off tomorrow for one for that Darien's participating in. We'll have Mark McEwen there, who's our emergency manager. He has better knowledge of this thing, but the ones that I can tell you I've dealt with in the past, we were able to get reimbursed for money that we had spent up until the time of the declaration and the repairs because of the type of repair and infrastructure it was. But that'll be a good question for us to ask them tomorrow.
What is the name of the design firm?
Fuss & O'Neill.
Okay.
We've used them in quite a few projects here in town, one of them in particular.
And is there any estimate of how much the entire repair would cost after the design?
They gave us a rough estimate of around $1 million to $1.2 million.
Okay.
And that's rough. what we're seeing out there right now isn't as bad maybe as we all thought it was going to be. I'm a little leery of letting it go too much longer on the repair, so I'm glad Darren has lined it up to get it, the Band-Aid in place, if you will. But I'm interested to see what the design comes back with and what extent we have to do any type of excavation out in the Long Island Sound end of the dam, the side of the dam.
You said there were leases existing. Are there any names on the lease, or?
They're deed documents, so they'll have family names that go way back.
Okay.
Again, something that I think the attorneys need to look at,
Okay.
not an engineer.
So there's an interpretation that it could be a responsibility of the town to maintain the dam because it's an appurtenance of the bridge. We have a
Of the tide gates,
Of the tide gates, okay, thank you.
which we repaired back in 2007.
And so what I was trying to get at with my earlier question, and I'll try again, is the dam, is a properly functioning dam necessary to the properly functioning floodgates? Another way of saying it, if we didn't repair the dam, would we be putting those floodgates at risk?
I think the floodgates would be worthless.
Okay.
If the dam doesn't work and you can't direct the water to go and clear out with the floodgates and open and close those floodgates on occasion to clear out the pond, then they're worthless. The water's gonna bypass them, and it's gonna come out. The pond will drain itself down to a certain level, like all water does. It is tidal, so as the tides come up and go over the dam, they'll come back and they'll recede, but that's all it'll do. It won't hold water.
And would that put the bridge at risk?
And that's a good question. I can't answer that. I know that the bridge abutments go down 10 feet below the muddy surface, but from what I can see on the plans, they're sitting on soil, not bedrock. So that would be a risk in taking the dam out of there, not knowing what kind of movement you could possibly get from the bridge abutments. And I don't think there's many structural engineers that are gonna guess at something like that. That's not something that you would take a risk on, not one of those bridges the stone bridge that's out there right now.
Would either of the consultants that we're using assess that? Whether there's bedrock or just soil?
We would have to do some type of soil borings, soil corings next to the abutments. There are spread footings, they're very wide. Your best guess would be from a bridge abutment, you'd be further away, taking soil samples down, so your bedrock estimates could be off a little bit. You wouldn't be right underneath the bridge abutments, which is where you kind of want to be to make that type of reading and make that kind of call.
And Kesh, are there actual separate floodgates, or is the abutment itself act as the floodgate?
The floodgates are separate aside from the bridge.
And do people open and close those?
We do, yes, twice a year. They'd like us to do a little bit more.
They're like big discs. Aren't there two big discs, like flapper valves?
They're flaps. Yep, we roll them up and then we set them back down. We do it when the tide is specific to an elevation so that we're not pushing against pressure where the tides are coming in or going out. Makes it more difficult to close or to open.
Is there a standard described in the lease of maintenance and fit for form and all the rest of the stuff that will be enforced by the lessor when the lease comes to terms, such that there might be other work that needs to be done in order to again, send the land back to, or whatever it is it's leased back to the lessor?
I didn't see anything. It's not that, I didn't see it in the documents that I read. It doesn't mean it's not there.
When will we know? I know that you said that discussions are starting tomorrow, but when will we know that FEMA will or won't pay for any of this?
That's a good question. They are not quick in moving on these type of things, but once they do get here and they get the information, there is a process. It does take a while. If I told you 2 months, 3 months, that would be a guess. It could be 4 to 6 months. But generally speaking, especially with a declaration like this and being that they're pushing for the briefing as quickly as they are, I think they're going to start moving quicker on this area, only because it's been so long since the storm. So my hope is that they do move it along quicker.
And given that, you know, per the lease, we are responsible for the gates in addition to the bridge, but we're, like, is there a way to find out if we are still subject to the lease? Has it expired? Have we not renewed it? I just wonder, like, is there a chance to bring the same consultant in to shore up the bridge and make sure that the bridge is functional while we figure out the dam portion of it?
We had two consultants working simultaneously on this. One is on the bridge and one is on the dam. So he gave us his recommendations for the bridge. And that part of those repairs were included in the request as part of ARPA. And those repairs are gonna go ongoing, they're gonna go forward. It's grouting, it's putting stone and riprap over the footings because they're exposed, all things to go from what we call a poor rating to a fair rating, which is a safety mechanism on rating for the bridges. So those repairs right now, it's about $163,000 are gonna go forward if the money's in place.
So the structural integrity of the bridge is not at risk?
It's not, at this moment right now, it's showing no signs that there's any type of failure on the horizon. You ask me if I take the dam away, what's going to happen with it, I can't predict that. Not knowing what I know about the footings down and what they're sitting on for the bridge, taking the dam away, I don't believe that would be a good idea. I don't believe that would be a recommendation I would make.
So maybe just a few thoughts before we, I think there's a lot of questions we all had on this in terms of what's being done, and there's some other things that are slightly away from the exact dollar amount appropriation, but I think are financial related. So I'd like to propose that there, sort of separate and aside from our vote, maybe that you guys look at 5 different aspects of just questions that I'm hearing here and others have kind of raised to me is, on the lease, I think we should work with council to ensure that if we're going to fix this bridge, and it sounds like the lease either expired 2 years ago or in 3 years, that we do it in connection with deciding what's going on with that lease, renewing it for another 100 or 200 years. I think we'll all be off this board by then, but let's just look at what needs to be done from a legal perspective to make sure that if we can make or when we make this investment in it, that the town still has proper legal control access and control over the bridge.
The bridge or the dam?
We're talking about the
You're talking
dam.
about the
So-
dam.
Well, the bridge sits on top, is the lease for the dam, for the bridge, for the floodgates, or for all of it? Whatever the lease actually controls.
Okay.
Because it sort of seems almost like one structure.
One
I-
system, I think it's, one system, certainly.
So let's make sure legally we have
Yep.
an issue on the lease. I think that relates to, because we want to make sure we're doing work on something that we're actually entitled to do work on, just from a legal perspective. And if there's anything in there on the maintenance, let's make sure that we figured out what we're required to do in connection with either the old lease or whatever the new lease is. Some triple net lease, most triple net leases, in terms of capital improvements, will tell you if you're, on the first day of the lease, it's the lessee's responsibility for 100% of capital. On the last day of the lease, it's the owner's, lessor's responsibility, and kind of halfway through, it's usually 50-50, but just look at sort of what that is. And I guess the other 3 things are, and Jen, maybe this is, sort of on your plate, is can we just make sure that whatever work we're doing, however we're approving this, and even going forward to the RTM, we're doing it in a way that would not jeopardize our ability to get reimbursement from FEMA?
I will confirm that, but the way that we choose to fund it would not jeopardize FEMA reimbursing us. They are looking at what occurred, what the damage is, and if it meets their eligibility.
Okay. And then I guess the next point on, just in terms of how we're funding it, if this wasn't covered by FEMA, or we didn't ultimately get reimbursement, we are looking at, I guess, 1 to 1.2 of repair, 160-ish of design work, and it sounds like, I listened to the Board of Selectmen meeting, I think $14,000 or $15,000 of temporary repair.
Mm-hmm.
So that begins to be a large number, and so I guess, Jen, to the extent we needed or wanted to consider bonding this, is there anything, do you have any thoughts on whether bonding could be appropriate for this, and anything that we would need to do ahead of sending this to the RTM if we needed that option?
End of term on the lease is real important if you're going to bond it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we would need to retain an interest in it. I would have to check with bond counsel because we don't own the structure. So I don't know if we can bond our required repairs on it, but I will find out.
Only half in jest. Hopefully, we have squatters' rights.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jen, this reminds me of what's happened to some of the, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, there were some private sewer lines in town that were actually owned by an association. We actually purchased them for the contributions that were not made as part of the original purchase, because we actually have full responsibility for maintaining those. So in that case, we actually purchased it. Let's just make sure if we're making an investment on this, we have control of it. We're able to, I'm not sure if it makes sense to buy this for $1 versus a 99-year lease. But let's just also make sure, Jen, like, what could we do to finance this other than, because $1.4 million-ish of capital is a large, it's typically something we would bond. And I know some of these questions are coming up a little bit last minute, they're ultimately going to go to the RTM, but if you needed our board to do something in the interim, Jen, as relates to bonding or approving something else, I'm sure we could call a special meeting in the next kind of week or two. And then the last piece was, I had a question in here, does the town's insurance cover any of our owned or leased infrastructure to the extent FEMA, we didn't get any kind of reimbursement from FEMA?
I don't think I can answer that question, what our insurance company's done. I've been dealing with that storm, been dealing with the garage and so on, and not had any contact with the insurance company other than to forward that information to the town administrator to handle and funnel directly to the insurance company.
Okay, so Jen, I guess maybe could you work with Kate just to look into that? Those were just listening to some of our conversation, the 5 areas that I thought follow-up would be prudent, but it also sounds like this is certainly a design, something you guys are going to need to move quickly on to get moving.
We'd like to.
And I just had a quick last question on FEMA reimbursement. Is it full dollar for dollar? Is there a percentage? Do we know how that works at all?
What I've read for this part of the declaration was 75% of what the insurance company would not cover.
Okay.
And that was the last time. So I'm going to hear more tomorrow, and we'll see what they have to say.
So does that mean insurance company first, then FEMA? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we committing the town really to the full, essentially 1.4 by approving the design? I mean, I'm still struggling with not knowing that that A, we have a responsibility to maintain the dam, and B, that it needs to be done to ensure the integrity of the bridge. I mean, if it's $160,000, it's still a big deal, but at 1.4 million, it's a very big deal.
Well, the 160 is clearly just for the design work, right?
Yes.
There's no further commitment in plot. I mean, there may be, we're going down a path, but there's no commitment to fund the
And
recommend.
should we find out that the lease is expired and the bridge could be shored up without that? Are we prepared, are we in a position to change our mind about the town and the taxpayers funding the repair work of $1.2 million?
I would ask whether, in fact, there aren't so many questions out there that what we ought to be funding tonight is the remedial work to keep anything from getting worse.
Well, I think the temporary repairs are being funded out of
My operating budget.
Okay, and
Public Works operating budget. And what is the Jen, in terms of the timing, when did this go to the RTM?
The 28th, their February meeting.
And when is the consultant planning to get to work on the design?
As soon as we give him the go-ahead.
The appropriation will become effective 10 days after the RTM. If the RTM approves it, it'll become effective 10 days later.
March.
10.
Oh, excuse me, middle of March.
And he has a
And then
schedule about
they
3
can
to
start.
4 months to do the design.
And we think that the temporary repair will keep it in working order for how long, did you say? I'm sorry.
I'm hopeful it'll keep it for at least 6 months to a year, but it'll have to be monitored.
And this study, this design work, I think you said would be 3 to 4 months?
Yes.
So I guess the question maybe that I'm hearing here is, it sounds like it needs to be fixed, right? Temporary repairs will fix it for a while, but in committing the 160 for the design, we sort of need to be prepared to spend another $1 million plus to fix it. And I think before we actually, and there are some questions I think that need to be figured out in terms of who actually owns it, and ensuring that we actually can do the work. So I think that the question would be, I mean, we have another meeting on, Jen, is our meeting on
We have a budget meeting on March 1st.
March 1st? Is that a special meeting?
No, that's a regular meeting, and you can add to the agenda. And even if it were a special meeting, we're far enough in advance that we could add to the agenda.
And in terms of where does, I should know now, where's our capital reserve at inside the reserve?
235? 253. Yeah, 253, 469.
This is coming out of fund balance, though, right?
Well, yes, so this is anticipated to come out of fund balance. So I guess Jen, maybe my question for you is, there seem to be some real gating issues, not as it relates to actually fixing the bridge, but just sort of the legal ownership, the lease, whether we actually kind of have permission to start doing, whether we actually still control the bridge and so forth. So I guess to the extent, do we want to spend this 160 before we know we're prepared to spend $1 million plus to fix it, or that we can, or there's some legal questions that be answered? In terms of, if we were to approve it tonight, it went to the RTM on the 28th, you said?
Right.
And then it would be approved on March
It'd be effective March 10th.
March 10th. When is the March RTM meeting?
The 24th?
So then the alternative is, if we get these other
21st.
questions answered relatively quickly, we could always add this to our agenda on March 1st, approve it out of our capital reserve, and then have the RTM in March sort of approve a reimbursement, if you will, the same way we did for the Board of Ed pickup trucks, right?
You could. You do, I think this is a little more controversial based on your discussion. There's a lot of questions surrounding it. So I think that if you were to fund it out of capital reserve, there's not necessarily a guarantee that that would be replenished by the RTM if they have concerns over the fact, a lot of the same questions that you have.
But if we wait a full month and, put it in front of them at their next meeting, in a standard procedure, then we don't think an extra month is going to cause anything to break, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Is it an extra, so you've been trying to get some of these answers for months, not 1 month. And I agree, we need the answers to these questions, certainly before committing $1 million too, if that's what the design firm comes back and says you need to spend. But why spend 160 to commission a design firm before we have these answers, right? So, because these answers could lead us to conclude we can't fund $1 million too, so why'd we get this design work to begin with? So my question is, how long will it actually take us to get these answers? Because it seems like they're fleeting. They're not written down on a piece of paper that anybody's been able to put their hands on. Or is it a matter of just raising the urgency around this set of questions?
I think it was an easy answer, we'd have it already. I think there's so much in the documentation from the deeds that go back to 1920, and on a lease agreement that we all know wasn't written in today's format, addressing today's issues and concerns. I think Wayne and his team have been digging deep as far as doing title searches down there to figure out where our ownership lies and where our responsibilities lie.
Well, with respect to that lease, I mean, there has to be certain landowners that have since then transferred it by deed, but that were the lessor, if you will, on that. So does it make sense, I mean, to amend and restate or kind of clean this all up before we go and spend, what's a total of $1 million for?
I can't tell you what's going to happen to that dam. I can't tell you if the dam goes, what's going to happen to the bridge. That's why I'm here in front of you asking for the money to start the design. If we delay it a month, maybe nothing happens, and we get the answers to what we can and cannot do and where our responsibilities lie.
Well, just be clear, you have the money and you're going to start anyway on the temporary.
Sure.
Like bringing,
Yep.
you talked a little bit about the haulers that and the guys that'll place it.
We're gonna be there next week doing it.
Yeah.
It's the next step. You know, how long
And this is 3 to 4 months, so the actual permanent, the temporary fixes will begin near immediately, it sounds like, right?
Yep.
And any permanent fix is at least 4 months away.
Yes, at least.
Isn't the bottleneck the
Yeah.
legal effort to dig into this and get that lined up and so on? And if in fact they can't do it, then we have to come back and look at how much of this we fund.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to I'd suggest maybe we table this and at our March 1st meeting, I mean, I think Ed, you've given us all the information we need, I feel like, on the actual project, actually building, repairing, I think the background and so forth has been very helpful. I think maybe at our next meeting, Jen, if you could maybe arrange for Wayne, combination of Wayne and Kate maybe, to think about the legal aspects of this, just to make sure that, you know, I think we want to make sure we can carry this whole project through, because the worst thing would be to do 160,000 of design work and then realize we can't start the permanent.
Or certainly understand what our risks are if we don't have that title, you know, chain buttoned up, nailed down, right?
Yeah, right now the dam and the bridge seem to be melted together in this lease, but if that is no longer an issue, I think we need to separate the two and decide. I mean, I certainly support whatever funds you need to keep that bridge safe and functional. But the dam, like I said, depending on what its purpose is in question for me.
Understand.
Any other questions? You know, it sounds like we have some legal ownership, lease questions. Any other sort of functional questions? You know, sort of design questions for Ed
Just,
and Darren?
you referenced earlier, bridge work, that's part of ARPA. The design portion of this could also be funded with ARPA money if we had availability there? Is that,
Yes.
I believe that's the case. Okay, so we may have an alternative way of getting at it within the next, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Although I do think the same questions would apply because we wouldn't be able to spend federal dollars
And what-
on something that.
What I'm
is
saying
not our
is if we don't have the
responsibility.
answers we're looking for in our budget cycle, well, in the next 30 to 60 days here, we've got a little bit more latitude with ARPA than we might have with.
Yeah, but ARPA still has to come in front of our board and then go in front of the RTM. The same as
Fair enough.
any type of off-cycle capital, whether it comes from our reserve or it goes directly to the RTM. So I think what I would say is, let's work on trying to get some of these legal answers so that we make sure we sort of are set to move forward with a long-term solution. And then we will reconvene this board as fast as is necessary to make sure we get the design work and permanent solution moving. And if we'll definitely keep F&B and other committees on board with what we're doing and keep them up to speed on this. And then to the extent timing really becomes an issue, if we needed to do this from our reserve, we can do that. Obviously, we want to make sure the RTM committees are sort of on board with that if timing really is an issue. But I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we figure out like some of these ownership and legal issues.
Okay. So we'll get the temps done out there and we'll keep an eye on it and I'll talk to Wayne about see if we can move this along. We all know he's not around right now, but he should be back the end of this week or
Okay.
next week, so be able to talk to him about that.
Okay.
All right?
Well, Darren, appreciate your time. Appreciate you going out and get the pictures and everything for this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed.
Well, it says, I guess it says, the agenda said discussion and possible action on, right?
Right, so you gotta do a motion to table.
Yeah. So can I have a motion to table item number 4, the discussion and take action on special appropriation for Gorham's Pond in the amount of $160,000 until such time as like these general 5 areas of questions that we have are answered. Taylor? Rob, second. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. So the next item is going to be item 5, discuss and take action on the special appropriation to replace the backstop at Baker Park in an amount of $11,000.
Good evening.
Pam?
Thankfully, mine's not half as complicated as that one.
Okay.
So, as I will reiterate in the memo that I sent to you all, is that we had a safety concern from one of the neighbors at Baker Park that baseballs were being hit from the baseball field into their backyard. And they have a 2-year-old. They're concerned about the balls landing near them. Certainly, we took this very important suggestion to hand, and we had our park supervisor meet a fence company out there as quickly as possible to see if we could come up with a solution for that. We firsthand did look at talked about moving the backstop, but they felt that if they could put up netting over this sitting area, that would stop most of the balls. It was $1,500. We put it up right away, and unfortunately, after like 2 months, the neighbor kept coming back and said it wasn't a great solution. So we went out with the Little League president, the park supervisor again, met with a couple other contractors again, and really feel quite confident from their recommendations that it's the backstop. That it's installed a little bit further away than a standard backstop would be at most baseball fields. It's narrow, a little bit more narrow than the current ones, and it has a shorter overhang. So with the designs that the contractors were showing, the Lilly president and our park supervisor, we feel quite confident that this would be the best solution. And the only solution, quite honestly, because it's directly next door to this neighbor. So we did have a discussion with the neighbor. We can't guarantee that nothing is going to go over that fence, but we do feel quite confident that it will reduce it greatly.
And how old is the existing backstop? It's been there for?
I tried to look back, but I only hear from those that have attended that park for many, many years. So it has to be 20 to 30 plus years old.
How is it suddenly a problem?
I don't know. Neighbor, it's changed hands,
The neighbor-
so it's a new
the
neighbor.
house changed hands.
I have never heard a complaint before this neighbor, but, perhaps they have an infant, and, I don't know if balls have been hit over there. I would imagine balls had been hit over there, but I have not heard any history of complaints from that particular house.
So what I recall from the Board of Selectmen meeting was that, the ownership of the home had changed hands recently, and there weren't young children there before, and now there are young children there. So there's a fear of being hit in the head.
And it's not just during like baseball play. The neighbor has witnessed just, father-son coming out and hitting around, and then oops, hit it over the fence. So he's come out and.
But they bought the house knowing that there was a baseball field there.
Yes.
So Pam, if I'm looking out at the backstop, are we talking balls that are going to the right? Is it
If you're behind the
If
backstop,
If
to
you're
the
a
right.
right-handed hitter,
Yeah.
and you foul the ball off
Yeah.
towards.
It's the first baseline, right?
Right.
It's that whole.
Yeah.
It's that
going to the
backyard,
backyard.
because that backyard is tight.
Right, and this
To the
current backstop, I have heard, although I haven't received complaints since I've been here, but I've heard many times that balls do go over that backstop because it's installed a little bit further away than a normal standard one would. So cars have been hit, which I don't think that's completely unusual at a ball field sometimes where there's parking lot near there, but
There's definitely been cars in the parking lot.
yeah, so
I've seen
I
that.
think moving, getting one that's a tad bit taller,
Yeah.
wider, with a greater overhang will do a great job. Much better than what we have now.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion? Dan first? Rob second? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous.
Oh,
No, it wasn't.
Oh, sorry, all those against? Okay.
Jim, for an education purposes, can I ask, this is coming, we've got this set to come from the general fund, but we do have the Board of Finance capital account. Wouldn't this be like a, surprise expenditure for a small amount in the middle of the year, capital item? Why wouldn't we use that fund?
So technically you can. We have tried to reserve using that for things that are of a time-sensitive nature. because this is a whole new purpose, a whole new project. And the RTM has been given the ability to weigh in. Although technically, because funds in your capital reserve are already appropriated, you can move them to something else.
So, I think the general theory has been, we use our capital fund when it's either timely purpose or an already approved project where it's gone over by a little bit and they need a little bit more. I think otherwise, generally, when we have a chance, we give when it's possible,
Right.
let the RTM sort of weigh in on this.
All set?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Good night.
time.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're going to be back to item 3, which is discuss and take action on the Darien Town Hall Employees Union Contract.
You did have emailed to you a memo from Lori Dunn, our Director of Human Resources, as well as another memo from Kate Bush, the Town Administrator. On this item, I just want to explain, the Board of Finance does not approve the actual contract because at this time, while there's a fiscal impact, there is no appropriation associated with it. Eventually, there will be an appropriation associated with it if it passes, but at this time, there's no appropriation. So what you would be discussing and then voting on is if you support or do not support the contract, and just getting a sense of the board so that can be communicated to the RTM who will be voting on the contract. The highlights of the contract, it's a 3-year contract. We are already in about a little more than halfway through the first year, so the retroactive wage increase back to 7/1/2021 would be 2.25%. 2.25% increase on 7/1/22 and 2.5% increase on 7/1/23. The first 2 years are right on par with average for negotiated settlements elsewhere in the state. The third year is slightly higher than the negotiated settlements. We are continuing to increase the employee cost share for medical. It'll be moving from 9.5% to 10% as of 7/1/22, and then going up to 10.5% and 11%. We do have the increase going on the last day of the contract, so that if the contract goes beyond 6/30/2024, if we go beyond that and don't have a new contract, the employees will have an increase in their cost share. And then the other most significant item is that all new hires will be going into a defined contribution plan. The HR director's memo goes over some other language changes, some of which are favorable to the town, as well as a few that are favorable to the union. But overall, these other language changes have minimal financial impact.
How many employees are covered by this?
Roughly 30.
And this includes the civilian dispatchers, right?
Yes, it does.
Hey, Jen, do we know how many of the 30 are in the defined contribution channel at this point versus pension?
So we have a
One.
couple of vacancies. So I know we have one that's in the process of being filled, and depending on the timing of that, they may or may not go into the DC. I'm not sure if we have a couple of telecommunication positions that are vacant, so when those are filled, they would go into the DC, and then any vacancy from here forward.
So, yeah, I think sorry.
So go ahead,
I just thought about the civil dispatch, right? It came on 3, 3, and 3, right?
Right.
So maybe I don't know, if you can just find out how many of each is in, because I'm thinking the initial 3 might be in the defined too.
Well, all 9 of those positions
Yeah.
were funded before we're moving to the DC. But because 1 or 2 of them is currently vacant,
Mhm.
when that position fills and there's a new hire, if
They'll
it's
be in the
after this
DC.
is approved by RTM, they'll go into the DC.
Jen, I think we have one employee under the Public Works Union right? Group that is on the defined
No,
contract.
actually, you're right, there is one dispatcher who is in the DC. You're correct. Because the dispatchers did have the choice if to go, they would go into the DC if they were not eligible to participate in the town DB plan. As for Public Works, that is for new hires after that contract was settled in 2021, and I don't believe we've had any new hires in that bargaining unit since then.
So just, why did how could the original civilian dispatch, go into a DC plan?
Because
Before
that
we-
particular dispatcher is a retired police officer, so he is a member of the police pension plan, the police DB, and cannot participate
Got
in
it.
the town DB.
Those dispatchers hired while this contract was technically expired but still in force between, I guess this contract expired June of '21, correct?
Correct.
And we've made hires since then.
Correct.
Were they governed by the prior
the prior-
contract? They were grandfathered into the prior contract even
Yes.
though it had technically expired?
Right.
Thank you.
How does the 5% match on the defined contribution plan differ from the cost to the town on the DB plan?
On the DB plan, it can vary from year to year. On our actuarial report, we will get what our required contribution is and what the total payroll that's in that plan. So we can say the contribution is X% of payroll. And in years when we've had a reduction in our ADC, it can go down to 5 or 6%. But in other years, it can go up 9, 10% as a percentage of payroll.
You got it. The contribution for the DB plan is actuarially determined, determined based on the methodology for a DB plan, which is kind of advanced science, if you will, to figure out exactly
Right.
how the calculation is done. So it could be more or less than the 5% match.
This memo
Correct.
says in fiscal '21, the DB was 9%,
Yeah,
while
that
the
makes sense.
DC would be 5.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that was 1 year.
And you're
It
saying the
depends
low
on all
end was
the-
6 though, right? So in all cases, it's a savings to the town.
It can go lower
In
than that,
history.
depending on market returns and other assumptions. But generally, in the time that I've been here, it's been 6 to 9%.
I think what's sure is that the defined contribution will provide or create a more sort of predictable and less volatile
Sure.
Yes.
expense line item for the town.
Yeah.
In terms of how much it saves over time, I think that's going to be sort of a little bit TBD and hard to exactly predict.
No, sure. And for the healthcare portion, how does the newly adjusted schedule match up to other contracts for other unions?
This contract that just expired, the town hall and the police union have the same cost share. They've been on the same schedule with that. The public works and non-represented employees are already at 10% and will be going to 10.5% on 7/1/20. No, we're at 10. On 7/1/22, we'll go to 10.5.
So you guys are already actively managing to keep them consistent?
Yes,
Yeah. On the town side,
yes.
they're different on the Board of Ed side.
Yeah, sure.
I guess just, Jen, 2 questions. On Lori's memo, the increase from 9.5% to 10%,
Mhm.
was it 9.5%? Did it just become 9.5% like on June 30th?
June 30th of '21. With the last day of the preceding contract, it went up to 9.5.
Okay,
So we're getting this full year at 9.5, even though the contract was unsettled.
got it. And then if you look at these increases, the 2.25%, 2.25.5%, how does that compare to what we had budgeted for that contingency?
It's within the same range.
Okay.
So the way that will work is this will be going to the RTM on February 28th. So once it is approved by them, I will go through and figure out what needs to move out of in the fiscal '23 budget. We'll true up what needs to move out of the salary contingency and into the departments and figure out if we set aside anything more than what's needed, because they have had retirements, people at lower pay, that sort of thing. So it is going to be a little bit different than what we had initially put into the salary contingency, but we'll true that up as the budget comes to you, so you can approve a real number for those departments.
When we're talking about a 2.25% or whatever % increase, is that always on an hourly wage? Or is it sometimes on a salary?
It is, the contract puts forward a annual pay rate, but they are, all the employees in this bargaining unit are hourly employees.
So I'm just curious with the transition permanently to a 35-hour work week, that I assume was from 40?
No, we've always
Prior to
been,
COVID?
for anyone but dispatchers, they've always been 35 hours.
Oh, okay, all right.
And these percentages don't include any steps.
Correct.
That exist. So these are, when you think about sort of
Just-
all in the memo here, there is some estimates about what the overall amount would be. You know, although there is a very large portion that are at the top step, so these percentages are applicable to them, but others will travel up through the steps.
Right, by the end of the contract, the town administrator estimates that 40% of the members will be at the top step and will no longer be receiving step increases.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was being calculated on a 40-hour work week annual salary before.
No,
and we've
they've
gone
been
to a
35.
35-hour week. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? No. So I guess I would call for a motion of, for the Board of Finance to show its support for this contract and recommend it to the RTM.
So moved.
Dan, second? Taylor? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to discuss and have an update on the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen budgets and the process. You all probably heard that on February 8th, I think it was, the Board of Ed approved their budget. And on the night prior, I think it was, right, February 7th,
yeah.
the Board of Selectmen approved theirs. The Board of Ed, Duke and Alan and the team will come before us on March 1st to present their budget. I do know that the Board of Ed reduced all in the net appropriation they're asking for by approximately $225,000 from what the superintendent had asked for, and so we'll get further explanation on that when they come in front of us in 2 weeks. And on the Board of Selectmen side, there were some additions, some subtractions. Net it went up by a little bit, but I know Monica and Kate and the team will be presenting those to us again, on the 1st as part of our regular meeting. A few other things, maybe Dan, if you could maybe provide the board an update with a little bit of what you're doing on the ARPA side and how that could potentially affect.
So we had our most recent ARPA meeting yesterday. I think it was our 6th full group meeting. There's a list of projects. There's 3 subcommittees. One is infrastructure, and that's infrastructure as defined under the ARPA Act, which is really water, sewer, and broadband. Doesn't include sidewalks or roads, et cetera. And then there's a health subcommittee, and then there's kind of a catch-all, all other. So those subcommittees put forward recommendations as to how the monies could be divvied up. We had a straw man list yesterday, which was being refined. Once we have that turn, we will meet and vote to recommend that list of projects, or excuse me, we will vote on that list of projects. It will then be posted for public comment, after which we will then modify that list as appropriate based on public comment and recommend a full list of projects to the Board of Selectmen. That's all going to occur over the next 2 to 4 weeks. Importantly for our group, as of now, and this is not a final list, but as of now, over $500,000 of the Board of Selectmen proposed capital budget for fiscal '23 would be funded by ARPA. So that's as proposed, not as decided, but just to keep everyone posted on some of the pressure on our mill rate might be to some degree alleviated with ARPA money.
I think on the Board of Ed side, the Board of Ed is going to be using approximately $225,000 of their ARPA funds to fund a portion of their budget, so we're getting some help on that side as well.
So Dan, a couple of questions on that. So do they have to be eligible, is there a certain restriction and criteria they have to be?
There is, yes, there is, but there's a kind of a catch-all on lost revenue.
Right.
And that lost revenue, and that catch-all can fund a lot of different things that aren't specified in the guidance provided along with the funding. So what you'll see in that kind of catch-all list are those kinds of projects. And they could be Parks and Rec projects, they could be town hall improvements, they could be police department improvements, there could be a lot of different things in there. Funding a mental health grant, that kind of a thing. Although that could ostensibly be in the health bucket as well. So the answer is yes and no. So they're yes, but there's this catch-all that you can kind of feed a lot of other things to. So as we've seen some of the other towns and scratched our heads, it's this lost revenue bucket that they're funding some of these projects with.
And last question, is it use it or lose it?
Use it or lose it.
Meaning,
Yeah, but
We have
we've
a
got-
few years to
we've got
spend the
years.
funds.
okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like if y'all come up with a list in the next couple of weeks or whatever, there won't be any ARPA funds available for the Gorham's Pond Dam design. Because
Well,
you
what
will
we are going to
allocate
do,
it.
so what we are going to do is, because what we've got is estimates of some of the work, like a lot of things that were on Ed's Gentiles list for future years is going to be, is on the ARPA list, but they're estimates. So we want to do is if we have 6.4 million of approved ARPA funding, we don't want to have 6.4 million of approved projects. We're going to have some wiggle room. And depending on how much wiggle room we end up with, we might have funding for that design study.
Okay.
So there's
I'll
a
have
few
to
different.
I'll have to trust you on the timing. I'm having a little trouble understanding how the timing would conceivably work out, that you would be able to tighten the numbers on the
We'll
other
see what the
projects
list
and
looks
not-
like. We might have, we'll see what the list looks like when we finalize it within the committee, take it to the public, refine it, and then recommend it to the Board of Selectmen. We'll see how much cushion there is. There may be adequate cushion, there may not be.
But I think if we did approve it, can't you use the ARPA funds to reimburse? Or does it need to be the primary source of?
No, we could use it to reimburse, but again, and if there's wiggle room, yes, but otherwise it would be displacing something else.
Yep. And again, the ARPA committee makes recommendations. The Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and the RTM make the decisions. So,
So
that answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you.
I think the timing is such that ultimately it can be approved by all three boards.
The current timetable would have all three boards approved this project list in advance of our final vote on the budget on April 5th.
The RTM
If we get meaningful comment from the public and have to kind of go back to the table, that obviously could slip.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget? Over the next 4 or 5 days here, I'll get out a sort of list, a proposed list for our 4 different or 3.5 different budget workshops starting in sort of mid-March. And then you guys can all let me know if there are any sort of issues or if we need to juggle things around.
Jim or Jen, early on, did we put the buddy list out there? Or did I just miss it?
We did.
Okay, so was it like early January that was sent out?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, on our team, yes, but not with FFB.
Oh, with
and-
FFB?
I don't think we have F&B.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jack sent something around, which I think I forwarded to you all. I can resend that along with our list, just to have it all synced up.
Yeah, would you mind just resending it? I
Yep.
just want to start never too soon to start reaching out. I mean, I know Dan's my buddy on couple things, and I got Dave on a couple. I got Jen, man, this is a group effort.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll send that around. So, next item is the, discuss and give us an update on the recent bond sale.
So we did complete our bond sale on Thursday, February 9th. We received 9 bids. We awarded it to the low bidder, which was JP Morgan Securities. The interest rate was different than what we had projected back in December. Our final interest rate that we ended up with is 2.35%. So there is a budget impact that I'll talk about in a little bit. We did receive a bond premium. It was about $900,000 on the initial bid. We resized total proceeds down to $30,786,450.87. So a par of $29,950. Final premium amount ends up being about $850,000. And our total production is that $30,786, which is only $1,450 more than we were shooting for. So we didn't get stuck with a huge overage. First principal payment will be in February of 2025. We will have 2 6-month interest payments in fiscal '23. And the impact over the Board of Selectmen proposed budget, which included the estimated debt service from December, is about a $111,000 increase to what the Board of Selectmen proposed. It is structured as level debt, and once we begin principal payments in 2025, our total debt will be, payment each year will be about $2.1 million. And we are scheduled to settle on the bonds and receive the funds on February 24th.
What was the initial rate that we expected?
1.95.
Nothing like the threat of war.
I think we had,
Interest rates.
Yeah.
Did you do the math on what's the additional interest per annum on the 40 basis point difference?
I did not.
Could probably do it.
111 over the life of the loan?
No, it's about 111 in fiscal '23.
well, but I think there were 2 things for the change in this year. One is that rates were a little bit higher than what we thought, but then it's also including, the mix of sort of premium bonds versus par bonds or discount bonds affects how much of our debt service is principal versus interest in any given year.
It's basically what
That's all I got.
So I think we had 9 different bids.
We did have 9 bidders, and
No.
actually the top 4 or 5 were all within a
Yeah.
couple of basis points of each other.
And
So
So it's a tight
it's really
number.
indicative that that was the right number that
Oh,
the
I
market
believe it
wanted that
was.
day.
Yeah.
That 195, we came up with that not long ago, right?
No, that was in December, and that
Yeah.
was
Interest rates, right.
based on the current rates plus 25 basis points at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Treasury hit just over 2% on that day, the 10-year, so.
The 10-year did?
Yeah, and it went up, sold off a little bit more since then, have since recovered back and is,
The short end has gone up quite a bit.
yeah.
Not that it matters on this spot.
But it is consistent with where we've been in the past. It's still a good rate. Just not as low as we were
We got
hoping.
used to cheap money.
Yes,
And it was 20 years?
yes.
20-year final, I think it had a 12.2-year average life.
That sounds about right. 12.151.
Okay.
All right.
The financial report?
Very good news on the revenue side. After our January collection period for property taxes, we have collected 98.28% of our budget. Definitely consistent with prior years, and see no reason that we wouldn't end the year with our collection rate being around our usual 99.6, 99.7%.
What do we budget?
We budgeted 99.45.
And Jen, this percent collected, this is the percent of what was budgeted.
Correct, not the percent of the full
So it's
levy.
actually a percent of 99.4.
Right.
So not that, not percent collection
Not,
rate.
Right.
not percent.
Right, just percent of the
billed,
budget.
Right.
I was confused, sorry.
It is confusing. Other revenues, parks program fees, they've collected $718,000. Their original budget was $665. I have to work with Pam and get that special appropriation to you so we can increase both the revenue and expenditure side based on what we see going on. Town clerk, they have collected 102.5% of their budget. They are still bringing in quite a bit of money. And on building permits, we've collected 62.91% of the budget, which is just under $1 million through January. 127,000 of that is for the redevelopment projects. So they are consistent with prior years, if not ahead of prior years on kind of the base permit activity. On the expenditure side, second line on page 2, debt service. We'll be wrapping up our final few debt service payments. We have 2 rounds of payments in February on the 1st and the 15th, and then we have one round of payments on April 1st. The fiscal 22 budget included $294,000 for a 6-month interest payment on the new issue, but because that issue didn't happen until after January 1st, we will not be using that $294 in the current year. So right now I'm working on developing a strategy to allow us to use it to offset some of our fiscal 23 debt. So I'll be bringing some transfer requests and kind of a whole plan to you in the next month or so as we work through the budget. On employee benefits, as of right now, it shows that we've used 80.24% of our budget. Within employee benefits is our accrued leave buyout. We've had several retirements that we did not anticipate. We budgeted $100,000 for accrued buyout. That's kind of been our standard. We've actually paid out $210,000. So we have a $110,000 deficit in that one line item within employee benefits. But what we've done in the past is kind of let it run because we know that there are vacancies or filled at lower rates from the people who did retire, a period of time when they're not on insurance, so we realized some insurance savings. So those savings will offset some of this deficit. But there was a discussion about that type of line before, a couple years ago, and the decision was made to not tax for anticipated retirements, but try to find it within the budget, and if we're not able to, we'd either go to contingency or, if need be, to fund balance. But we didn't want to tax for retirements that may or may not happen.
Jen, what is the 267, can you remind me, what was what was that used for a specific contract?
267
on the contingency?
On contingency, that's a combination. It's salary increases for non-represented employees. If you look on the contingency page, page 5, it's the 190 for non-union and Public Works, Park and Rec wage increases, as well as the 3 items that have come out of general contingency. Moving up the hire date for dispatchers, the City View extension, and the 457 DC consultant. So that contingency line on page 2 includes both the salary contingency and the general contingency.
Got it.
Hey, Jen, is the information technology number, is that the one, the funds that are back to Board of Education for their support?
That is part of it. That's, let me find it, hang on one second.
On page 2,
Yeah.
toward the bottom, it's like 409 and up.
Right,
Like,
so.
there's only 42 left, and we're gonna be like,
We've paid most of our annual contracts. We've made the journal entry over to the Board of Education for their services. Most of our annual contracts are due in the early months of the fiscal year. So we have some ongoing phone expenses, some other smaller contracts that'll be due, but the 42 should be very close to spot on.
so it's most of this, let's say.
More than half?
Company, inner town.
Yeah, more than half of it is for contracting with the Board of Ed for their IT services.
Okay.
On page 4, we have our summary of state revenues. Those are coming in as expected. The big number that'll be of interest will come in February for our first payment on excess cost reimbursement, which is 75% of what our total allocation will be. So that'll give us an indication of what we'll actually get for the year for excess cost reimbursement.
So on the educational cost sharing, we're 6 months in and we received 214. So does that mean we budgeted 442, but we're on a run rate of 428?
We budgeted 442, we've received 228. Received as of 1/31 is 228, and so we
sorry.
should receive one final payment of that same amount in April.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
So we've received 50% of the state's budgeted.
Yeah,
Right.
I got you. I was reading the column the wrong way. User error.
And in this, in the upcoming budget, I think we're projecting like 470.
Yes, and that was off of the proposed budget.
Well, I heard talk today that they may try to, I don't know how quickly it would impact the budget, but increase the pool of funds available to ECR, so we should talk about that.
I sent an email to Duke, to the chair, vice chair, and Adley, asking that he, was suggesting that they might want to speak at the public hearing that's going to be on, I think, the 18th, on Thursday, for the education portion of the grant. I think that's typically been funded at the 75%. It's 140.6 million there. And so I asked Duke and Allen if they would consider submitting testimony advocating for the, for 100% funding,
Yeah.
which should be close to 200 million, I think, at the state level.
You've been knowing about that for years.
We talked about it today among the business managers. We had a Zoom call. That was one of the 3 things we focused on, and it's estimated between an additional $60 to $80 million. And I said, it's a drop in the bucket for the state budget. Why don't they do it? Because it would generate a lot of goodwill. And our legislative liaison said, Paul, you're talking too rationally.
Yeah.
And the others were the ECS and also school reimbursement for construction. The path to get reimbursed is just so convoluted, and there is no organization chart or list of responsibilities of the people up there. Plus, the guy that was in charge of that got dismissed a couple months ago for undue influence, and I'll send all of you the article detailing it. He is trying to force it. It involves his daughter getting a job with a company that he had recommended, so he was summarily dismissed.
On page 5, the center of the page on the left, general fund salary increase contingency, we have $80,000 left. We will be moving funds out of there to, for the settlement of the town hall union contract for any fiscal '22 impact. And then, like I said, you'll see the fiscal '23 come through as an adjustment to the Board of Selectmen's budget.
But that, you think that 80 will cover it more or less?
I think so. Then sewer on 6 and parking on page 7. The parking fund is picking up a little bit. Renewals on parking permits have been fantastic. We're $88,000 over budget. We're seeing a little bit more from pay stations and ticket revenue, but Omicron did not help those at all as people were working from home or not commuting.
So what do we budget for the parking permits in the current budget year?
In fiscal '22, we budgeted 75% of the 18-19 actual, we budgeted 275.
Yeah, no, that I got. I meant for the year that we're.
For fiscal '23, I don't recall offhand.
Okay, yeah, because I was just looking at the collection rate, and it appears that, people are gonna keep their permit no matter what, right? So
Yes.
So the pay rate, it was right to be conservative when we didn't know, but now it looks pretty sure that at least on the permit side, people are gonna keep them. So we should be budgeting that closer to historical.
Yeah, I
Well-
don't recall what's in the budget, but we can take a look.
Well, if the MTA returning to peak charges and increasing rates and eliminating discounts as of March 1st, they may have a better crystal ball, so we might see this all picking up.
Is that right?
Yep.
Who has a crystal ball?
The MTA is sort of reinstating peak fares and eliminating certain discounts and so forth, all beginning March 1, so I think they're anticipating.
I might not rely on their forecasting skills.
Yeah. They're anticipating people going back to the office more.
They could get the trains in on time. They can predict when their train's gonna get here.
Let's start with
That would be a
Yeah.
start.
And then on
Do your
pages
job
8,
first.
9, and 10. On pages 8, 9, and 10 are active bond projects. This will have a pretty big update in terms of bond proceeds and these cleaning up these cash deficits that you see once we settle on the bonds. So you'll see that in the March report.
Point of education for me, on some of the items like the Holmes roof and skylight, the Henley roof replacement, there's an estimated completion date of 2021. What does that mean to me?
It means that is what the Board of Ed has told us their completion date was going to be. I think at the last time
Okay.
I touched base with them was in December. They said that the project was complete and that they're closing out final invoices.
Okay.
So I think physically the project is complete, financially it is not.
Fair enough. But it sounds like by the end of this fiscal year, we may be able to close some of these things
Yep,
out.
definitely.
That's what I'm really looking for.
I've
Jen,
got a
ha-
question about the new sidewalks and the town hall gymnasium. It appears they have the same budget, is that right?
That's coincidental. They were both a original appropriation of $75,000 and $344 just for issuance costs.
Okay.
And Jen, in terms of Oxford, how much of the 30.7 went to the, against the 35 million? Like, how much of the 30.7 are proceeds?
I think it was 27-ish. The vast majority of our $30 million issue was Oxbridge.
Okay.
And if you recall that discussion on how much we wanted to bond for that, this should get us to the end of the project. We may have some true up based on if the project runs a little more or less than what the cash flow was, and depending on what the actual state reimbursement is. But we should be pretty
But what
close
we
to
raised
fully
is
financed
based on
on
what
that.
we're hearing from the building committee will be necessary.
Yes.
And if that project does go over budget,
I don't think it's gonna go over budget. It may go beyond what we have already borrowed, and
And it
then
goes
we
under
still have
budget.
room to borrow more.
yep. If it goes under budget, they won't transfer it to Mr. Martin's project.
Yeah, HHR.
And that is all I have on the financial report.
Approval of minutes? Anyone have any comments?
Oh,
Okay, have a motion to approve? Dan, second? Dave, Dan? All in favor?
I wasn't here.
So are you all against?
I
You can still vote in favor of minutes, even
Can
if
I?
you're not here, yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Sorry, did we already say, did we go through this ones already? I thought you had to abstain. All right, I'm absolutely in favor then. Great.
Okay, so all those in favor? Unanimous. Special assignments?
The HHR committee, I believe, is now fully seated. And so we have our first full meeting on Thursday to elect officers and get marching instructions from Kip and the team in terms of exactly what needs to happen first and sort of deadlines and those types of things.
Kip serving on that committee?
No, he's not serving, but he has been incredibly instrumental in helping us figure out, like, take the learnings from his experience to make sure that we, get everything slotted in the timeframes appropriately and figure out any potential snafus that may come up along the way.
That's
So.
great.
I think Duke mentioned at OPC last week, that I think he and Duke and Rusty and a bunch of others had kind of compiled a sort of a binder of.
Yeah, I think they have a binder set up for us to use as our playbook to go forward with. So.
I think that's great.
Oxbridge, the academic wing is 75% complete. If you haven't seen it, just drive in the parking lot, bang a left, and it's right in front of you. And if you haven't seen it for a while, it's pretty amazing how much progress has been made. So, and it continues to be under budget. So,
And you get a chance to see it on March 12th.
March 12th,
Yep.
yes. I'm assuming that's part of the March 12th. I don't know if this will Oxbridge be part of the March 12th tour, because it's a construction site.
I think it will be.
Good, okay.
I would think.
Bring your hard hat.
IT committee, we have a
Bring your
meeting
green
scheduled,
hat.
and I'll get you a new update at the next meeting, when, but at least we're on the board.
Okay.
Still looking for somebody to edit, so if anybody has IT prowess or anybody in town who'd like to be the chairperson, let us know.
Are there additional seats available for sort of appointed individuals?
Yeah, I think there's some, from what I can tell, there's some elasticity,
Yeah.
we're always looking for good people to join, so, yes, sure, is my answer to you.
But I guess when that was created, maybe check with Kate and or Monica, but do they already fill all the different positions? Okay, so they're open positions.
How many members are on the committee?
11, I think, off the top of my head.
Okay.
We need to get a better cadence going, to be fair.
Okay. From audit,
Audit.
the audit is finalized? I think
It's
you all-
finalized, it's posted on the website, it's posted to Emma for our required disclosures. It is submitted to GFOA for their annual reporting award, and you all have received a copy.
And it was used in our bond offering last week?
Yes,
Is that available in either a hard copy or e-version or both?
it is available as an e-version. I can
Can you send that?
send it, or it is available on the website. And I did send it out to all of you, but I can resend it.
Jen, with my green eye shade firmly attached, any material weaknesses or material adjustments proposed?
No,
Thank you.
nothing material.
Great, perfect.
I'll resend that.
Thank you.
Chairman's report, nothing new. Any other new business? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Paul? John second. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you keep the